Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee. Just finishing up my second cup of coffee here today. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of stagger planting your garden and kind of how mom and grandma planted gardens. Now, the big thing with us here is our the weather patterns have changed, and mom and grandma used to plant a lot of stuff in April and May, and now there's always a chance in May for a frost. And years ago, April and May was warmer, and then September and October were typically colder. So now our times have more or less changed. May, you want to be careful when you put stuff out in May, but typically September and October are warm. You don't have any issues with it. Typically for us here, our frosts are right around the 1st of November, our first hard frost. So depending on how you plant your stuff, we actually have a longer growing season here now than we had when I was a kid growing up. And typically, I will plant my potatoes around the 20th of April. Potatoes are the first thing that goes in the ground, and I typically like to get my potatoes in the ground early, because those potatoes that I plant in April are typically done sometime in July, which gives me a chance to work that ground up, put some more compost and stuff in it, and put a second crop in, and then I get another small crop in November. Now, why do I want to do that? Well, one, of course, it's because, it's extra food. Extra food is always good. But two, the potatoes that mature in November will typically winter over, and you can use those as your seed stock for the next year planting. And that's exactly what I did this year, because I'm trying to plant as much stuff as I possibly can from my own seeds, my own stuff that I've saved for this year. So I'm a little bit more self-sufficient with that stuff than normal. And the russet potatoes, or Burbank potatoes, the baking potatoes, they are one of the potatoes that grows the best for us. And that's what I planted. My first 35 or so hills that I planted were all those russets that I harvested last year in November. They were starting to get their legs on them, and it was time to get them in the ground. Then the next thing that I plant is onions. Onions I will typically put in about a week after the potatoes, so right around the 30th of April. They are typically done sometime in August. I plant different varieties. I will plant usually red or purple onions, and then I will plant either some type of like a Vidalia sweet onion, or I'll plant a yellow Spanish onion. And the yellow Spanish onions in particular, if you get a good crop of those will winter over. I actually got on my onion braids in the basement, I believe I still got probably about a dozen onions from last year in August that are still good. We're still using them. And then, of course, your garlic should already be up, because the garlic would have been put in last year. And then the next thing that's right around the 1st of May that you want to plant out, for us anyway, it's all your kind of cold hardy crops. It's stuff like your radishes, your peas, and your lettuces. They do good in the cooler weather. They don't like the hot weather as much. And then typically especially like lettuce will mature quickly, 30 days, whatever like that. And depending on when you plant them, you might be able to get another crop of those in before the really hot weather sets in. And then at that point, when you get toward that first week in May, then it's a good idea, if you got enough space, where you plant a second crop of potatoes. That way all your potatoes don't come in at the same time, stagger planting. And I like to do that with different varieties of vegetables. Stuff like tomatoes, you maybe want to plant a few plants of a real early tomato and then a real late tomato. Then you don't have all your tomatoes come in at once. You got, bushels of tomatoes that you got to either burn the midnight oil to do something all them. But if you stagger plant them, you use different varieties, then you can go ahead and not have everything all at once. You can use some for fresh. You don't have to be right to the gun with canning all that stuff. And that's just some stuff that I've learned from experience over the years. And another thing too, like now is the time, like if you left a few carrots in the ground or a few parsnips in the ground, that stuff's going to be starting to come up. So then you can decide, like I just dug some carrots here. It was the last of my carrots that I had in the ground. And that would have been a perfect time for me to leave a few of those if I would have wanted them to go to seed, because carrots, parsnips, they seed on the second year. So this is kind of a crucial time between about the 20th of April and about the 10th of May is a really crucial time on how you set up your garden so you can get the most out of it and it can be the most beneficial to you. Now, the last thing is protecting for frost. If I put in any pepper plants and tomato plants, and I got peppers and tomatoes started in the house right now, but it's still a little bit early. I like putting those out around the 15th of May, and then I will typically cover them with my milk jug hot caps until about the 1st of June. I want them to be in the ground, hardened off, get a little bit of experience in the ground before I just throw them out to nature. And typically about 2 weeks does that. So if you plant them around the 15th of May, you cover them, you give them a little protection for them first couple weeks. It'll give them a chance to establish their roots a little bit better. And whenever the roots and the stems and stuff, they're more mature and they're more established, you will have a better chance of them surviving. If there happens to be a freak frost or something, there's a better chance that those are going to survive for you and not have so much of a problem. Now, another thing with frost is a hydrated plant and hydrated soil around it is going to hold in the radiant heat from outside, and it's going to have that mass to hold the heat. So if you think a heavy frost is coming, you want to water your stuff and you want to make sure it's really, really hydrated well. Again, you can use mulch like I've used straw and stuff. I've hydrated my potatoes in straw. There's been some times when we've had frosts mid-May and my potatoes have already been up a couple of weeks already. So then I have to have some way to mitigate that. Of course, you can always use plastic and cover stuff too. I've actually covered my strawberries a couple of times with plastic. My strawberries are completely loaded with blossoms right now. I should get enough strawberries to actually do a couple batches of jam this year, which is kind of what I'm hoping for. And that's because I kind of covered everything to protect it from last season. And then typically the last thing that I'll put in seed-wise is like cucumbers and beans. I'll typically plant them closer toward like the 20th of May because I want that ground to be warm and good and hydrated for those seeds to germinate quickly. You can also, like beans, you can pre-germinate, which means you take those beans, you put them in like a paper towel, you moisten the paper towel, you leave them in the house for a couple of days so they start to already sprout before you put them in the ground. That actually kickstarts them by at least a week if you want to get them out and going. And then the last thing that I will typically plant are my herbs that like warm weather, stuff like oregano, rosemary, thyme, that kind of stuff. Sometimes those plants, it's best to even spring for the money and buy the established plants because they have a hardier stem and they can take a little bit of more abuse, whether it's cold or warm. But anyway, just want to touch base with you guys here on kind of my garden planning schedule, how I do it here in Michigan, and it's worked really well for me over the years, so I don't have all my stuff coming at the same time. Gives me a chance to can everything and put up and get as much utilization out of my garden as possible. But anyway, this is Modern Refugee. Appreciate all my subscribers out there. Hope you guys got a little information, a little entertainment out of this video here, and you guys have a good one.